So we're going to go ahead and begin Chapter 3 with the Preamble. The Preamble is the introduction of the Constitution of the United States. So basically what it is it's a brief paragraph that tells you what to expect in the Constitution and the values that you'll expect to see in the Constitution. So let's read it together and we'll go over some of the vocabulary so it makes sense. So the preamble, as you can see, there's an image down below. It's written on some paper and it says, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility." And what does that mean? Well, domestic is of the home and tranquility is peace. So to ensure peace in the home and provide for the common defense, so to protect the people, whether with having a good military system or in some other form, and then to promote the general welfare of the people, so that's their health and well-being, and to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. What does that mean? Well, to make sure that we have secure freedoms, that we have rights, and that when they say posterity, they mean that those rights carry on with our children. So whenever you see posterity during that time, they're thinking of the children that we will eventually have. And then do ordain and establish this Constitution. And ordain, what they're basically saying is make into law, establish a law in this Constitution for the United States of America. The articles of the Constitution are the main body of the Constitution, and they are made up of 7 articles. The articles explain how the government works. They also carefully describe the rules for electing government officials, like senators and the president. The first 3 articles help describe how our government is made. Article 1 describes what we call the legislative branch. And there are 3 branches of government. There's the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. And each branch makes up one of 3 articles. So let's quickly go over these 3 articles. The first one, again, is the legislative branch. It's the lawmakers. So when you hear about Congress, these are the lawmakers. And it consists of the House of Representatives and the Senate. So basically, the Senate is 2 senators from each state that we elect, and then so they help make rules for us, and then the elected representatives, and that's depending on the population of each state. So the greater the number of people that live in a state, the more representatives you'd have. Alright, so there's about 435 representatives in Congress right now. When we look at Article 1, the role of the legislative branch is discussed. And so what is their role? Well, they are the lawmaking body of our government. Now, Article 2 describes the executive branch, which is our president and the vice president. And they are elected as defined in Article 2. And so it also describes the powers and the responsibilities of the president. The president executes the laws the legislative branch creates. So that's how they work together. Laws are created, and then the executive branch, which is to execute, is the term to make laws happen. The last article is for this page is Article 3, and it's the judicial branch, and that's consists of the Supreme Court justices. And they make sure that the laws, before they're even Alright, now we're going to do a little review on the 3 articles. Feel free to hit the back and forth button on the bottom left of this PowerPoint in case you need to make a reference to the previous slide. What I want you to do is pull out a piece of paper and number it 1 through 4. I slipped in a 4th article and you'll hear more about that later. What I want you to do is for number 1, you're going to title it Article 1. And you're going to write which branch of government Article 1 describes, and then what's the role of this branch. And then you're going to do that for Article 2, which branch of government and what's the role of the branch. And then Article 3, again, the same thing. For Article 4, you're going to write it down, but I already gave you all the description that you need. So it says states and federal government and their roles, and the rights a citizen has in one state will be respected in all states. Now, what does this mean? To give you a little historical context, Article 4 helped slaves who were free in the northern states to maintain their freedoms in the southern states. And this is before 1775, when the Battle of Lexington began the Civil War. And Civil War was a significant war between the North and the South, and the different views on slavery. So the southern states at this time wanted to keep slavery more so than the North. They were dependent on the work of the slaves. Well, Article 4 protects northern slaves who have been free when they travel. So this kind of freedom, whatever it may be nowadays, there are different kinds of freedom that some people have in one state and not another. Well, Article 4 can protect people from that. Alright, so go ahead and write that down in every article that you see here. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and finish up with the last 3 articles to the Constitution. Now, when were these articles ratified? Meaning, when were they approved? Well, in 1787, finally, 13 states approved these articles. It took about 2 years to get everyone to agree. Those who were involved in writing these articles, they're called the framers of the Constitution. There were 55 framers involved. So let's review the last 3 articles. Article 5 describes how to make changes to the Constitution. And any change we make, we call it an amendment. We're amending it. And basically what they're saying is it requires a 2/3 vote to even suggest an amendment. And when we say 2/3 vote, that's of Congress, the lawmaking body of the United States. And if we can remember in a previous slide, we said Congress consists of the Senate, which is 2 from each state, so that's 100 senators, and 435 representatives from various states, depending upon the amount of population in each state. So how many amendments do we currently have? Well, we have 27 amendments right now. And if you think about it, since the 1700s, that's not too many. It's doable. Let's move on to Article 6. Article 6 declares the Constitution the supreme or highest law of the land. What it says is all government officials must swear under oath that they promise to support and obey the Constitution. The framers really wanted everyone to agree that we will all follow the Constitution. And as I mentioned before, the Supreme Court, or as we call it, the judicial branch, ensures that we do follow the Constitution. Okay, we're closing this out with Article 7, which tells how the Constitution will be ratified, or when we say ratified, we mean approved. So this was when there were 13 states. And for the Constitution to be approved, it required at least 9 states to approve the Constitution. That is it for Articles 5 through 7. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and review Articles 5 through 7. So go ahead and pull out that piece of paper where you had Articles 1 through 4 written. And now we're going to write in Articles 5 through 7. So to the best of your ability, try to recall what we have just reviewed in Article 5, 6, and 7. You're welcome to hit the back button and review what we had covered. Okay, so now we're going to spend probably the last portion of this chapter on the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. The First Amendment is a very, very important amendment. This covers a lot of our freedoms. The First Amendment states that we have the freedom of religion. And the freedom of religion is primarily how this country was founded. A lot of people were escaping religious persecution, and they wanted to be able to worship the way they wanted, so they journeyed across the ocean, and here they are today, hopefully able to celebrate their own religious practices. Freedom of speech is another very, very important freedom. A lot of people in a number of countries cannot speak out against the government. If they did, they will be thrown in jail. They could be killed. Freedom of press is vital for us because we need the press to be able to report what they see and observe so that the people are informed as to what's going on in the country. Freedom of expression includes assembly and petition, which means we can approach the government unhappy and state why we're unhappy. We have that right and freedom, and ask for changes. So we have the right to ask for changes. So the First Amendment is covering a lot of our rights and freedoms, and we're very fortunate to have those rights and freedoms, and they must continually be protected. And in order to protect those rights and freedoms, we must always keep ourselves informed and fight for those rights. Again, the First Amendment is always challenged. An example is the internet. There has been some conflict about restricting access to certain sites, and the First Amendment protects us and keeps information available to us. Another important thing about the freedom of religion is we have the right to practice whatever religion we have, but the government cannot enforce any law or rule that follows a religion. Basically, the government needs to be free of religion, free from introducing a religion or keeping a religion from being practiced. So the government must remain very neutral. An example of where this became a very serious issue was the teaching of creationism. Is this a right or not? And creationism is based on the Old Testament. And so is that something schools, public schools, should be allowed to do? So there are conflicts, ideological conflicts, because evolutionists would argue that creationism isn't grounded in scientific evidence, whereas others feel that creationism is a valid argument. So these two kind of ideologies can bring in the First Amendment, and the government cannot always get involved in determining whether certain decisions can be made by people or not when it comes to religion. However, public schools are a function of the government. They receive public funds. So any promotion or inhibition of religion in a school is not allowed by the government. So we see a lot of cases in the Supreme Court dealing with boundaries around this issue. It's quite fascinating if you were to follow it. So that's the First Amendment, really brief. The Second Amendment is a hot topic right now due to a lot of gun shootings and murders and terrible stories of children being shot at in schools. Columbine is one fine example. So should the citizens have access to any gun that they choose? Well, the Second Amendment does protect citizens the right to bear arms. Exactly what does this say in the Second Amendment goes like this: a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What this is saying in more modern times is that people need arms to protect themselves from the government. And during the 17 and 1800s, when a war broke out, Minutemen, or they're called Minutemen because they responded in a minute. Basically, they were farmers that would grab their gun and suddenly there they were, part of a militia. So people need to be able to protect themselves. And the Second Amendment states that. However, with these new outrageous killings and shootings, the question has arisen that should we have access to any kind of gun we want? Some states do restrict firearms like machine guns, cannons, silencers, and short-barreled rifles or shotguns. But overall, anyone can go buy a gun as long as they fill out some forms. So there's going to be new restrictions. And what those restrictions entail are in question. The Second Amendment, again, must be followed. So it'll be interesting to see what occurs. What I would like you to do is pull that paper out that you have and give me your opinion. Do you think there should be any restrictions on the kinds of guns that we are allowed to have? If yes, explain why, or if not, explain why. Okay, we're on to the Third and Fourth Amendment. The Third Amendment protects people from having to let soldiers stay in their homes. Why this amendment came to be was that the British forced the colonists to allow soldiers to stay in their homes. To give you a little understanding of what this means was the colonists were the people living here in the United States when the United States still didn't have a constitution yet. We still hadn't really evolved into the country that we are yet. And we were at war with Britain. And so we're trying to get freedom from British rule because the British were imposing unjust taxes and control over the colonists who just wanted to be left alone and to develop their own government. So this wartime, British forced colonists to house their soldiers. It was uncomfortable for colonists to house these soldiers. So the Third Amendment protects us now, although it's not often that we have to be confronted by this. The next amendment is a really important amendment. It's the Fourth Amendment. Basically, anyone in authority cannot enter your home and search your private items or stop you on the street and search your things without what they call probable cause. So it's unfair or unjust for anyone to break into your home and go through your things without a special warrant, a special court order is what they call it. So if anyone, even a police officer, asks to go through your things, they cannot. So you are protected by the Fourth Amendment. An interesting example is if there is probable cause, they can search your things. So, for instance, if you, and this has happened, I've seen it, if you have marijuana in your hair and you're driving and a police officer pulls you over, they can search your car if they notice there's a bud in your hair. So that is probable cause. So the Fourth Amendment does have some delineations. The Fifth Amendment is a very important amendment. It protects Americans from being unfairly accused of committing a crime. It requires certain steps to happen before a person is charged with a crime or indicted. Indict. The Sixth Amendment is the right to a fair trial. So this is the right for you to defend yourself in a federal court trial. If you are accused, you have the right to be told your crime and to be given a speedy public trial. That means you don't have to wait for years to go through trial. You have the right to a lawyer to argue your case, and the right to have witnesses that appear, and even they can be forced to appear to give your side of the story, to support you. And then you have the right to listen to the witnesses and also question them in order to make sure that your side of the story is explained well. So for the Seventh Amendment, it addresses civil lawsuits, which means lawsuits between people. And these lawsuits do not involve a crime, for instance, breaking a law. It's more about settling disputes between people. So the value disputed cannot be more than $20, or it has to go before a jury. The Eighth Amendment deals with bails, fines, and punishment. So basically it's trying to set that a judge can set a bail, and that's for breaking a law, and the accused can pay the bail as a deposit to stay out of jail while waiting for trial. The worse the crime, the higher the cost of the bail. So you've heard of bail set at $100,000. That means a great crime was committed. Sometimes bail is only $300. So the money is returned when the trial begins. So it's not like you're paying out and you're never going to see that money again. And let's see, the amendment also protects people from torture, and that's a very important protection to have. Congratulations, you've made it to the last of our PowerPoint presentation. We're covering the 9th and 10th Amendments. And as a review, these first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights. And how did the Bill of Rights come to be? Well, there was a group called the Anti-Federalists. This group of men, it was men, they believed that the people's rights and independence needed to be protected. So they're called anti-federalists, like against federal government, meaning they didn't want the government to have more power over the people than the people themselves. They wanted to make sure that the people's rights were protected. They wanted to make sure that the government did not become despotic, autocratic, and what that means is a cruel government that takes away the privileges and rights of the people. So in order to ensure the safeguards of people's rights, the Anti-Federalists would only agree to the Constitution if the Bill of Rights were in place. So let's review the last two amendments of the Bill of Rights. The 9th Amendment, I'm going to read it as it's written first, and then I'll explain what it means. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So what this means in normal terms is the 9th Amendment protects people's rights not listed directly in the Constitution. Not every right that could exist is in the Constitution. That would be a very long document then. And plus, we discover new rights as we evolve and grow as a society. Some of these rights might include the right to join groups, the right to run for public office, or the right to travel freely around the country. Okay, so let's go on to the 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. Now, again, in layman's terms, this means the 10th Amendment grants to the states and to the people powers not listed directly in the Constitution. So it means states must care for the citizens who live within its borders and must keep its citizens safe and provide things such as education and health care. So again, not all of the rights are mentioned in the Constitution and the amendment. So what's not mentioned, this 10th Amendment is saying the states have the power, and not only the power, but responsibility to protect the people. This concludes Chapter 3.